Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Collecting Comics, the show where we talk about comics and how to collect them. My name's Sean, and today we're going to be talking about grading comics. But first, we would like to thank our friends over at Watto's Scrapyard for sponsoring this episode of Collecting Comics. So, when you talk about collecting comics, there's only a couple of reasons why you should get a book graded. One is it's an older book, you want to preserve it. Um, it might have some imperfections on it, and that's okay. But the older these books get, the less likely they are going to survive throughout time. With the example of this Avengers #3 book, um, it's very old, so you really want to take care of it. It would This would be a good example of a raw book, a book that's not graded, uh, to qualify for getting something graded. Another example would be like the Silver Surfer #44. That's the first appearance of the Infinity Gauntlet, so it's important in the history of comics. So if it's a nostalgic book to you, or if you're a fan of Thanos or the Surfer or the Infinity Gauntlet, then this would be a good book for you to think about getting graded. Another example of some decent books to get graded is, for example, the Nova #1. That's the first appearance of Richard Rider, and She-Hulk #1, which is the first appearance of She-Hulk. Um, because the MCU is so popular, a lot of times as you get closer to the movie, these books tend to go up in value. And right about when the movie premieres, it it kind of fluctuates, good or bad, just due to the popularity of the movie. As these movies get closer to production, as these movies get closer to the release dates, you'll start seeing the prices of these books going up. Not to mention, these are some older books, and they really will appreciate throughout time, and you're going to protect your investment of buying these books if you get it graded. The second reason I kind of think about grading a book is to eventually maybe flip. There's a group of collectors out there who tend to purchase these same books that I've just talked about: the first appearance of Richard Rider, the first appearance of She-Hulk, first appearance of Infinity Gauntlet, things like that, so that when these movies do come out, they get it graded. They put it the best. They try to get the best grade that they can, and from there, it's a waiting game, because again, as you get closer to those movies, it kind of fluctuates up and down, and depending on how well the movie is, the book might go higher, lower, just kind of depends. There are a few different grading entities, and one of those entities is CGC. It's the most popular of the grading entities right now. Another company is CBCS. I'd probably put them at like a second tier if you were to get something graded. And the reason that is because they do verification of unwitnessed books. So in the case of CGC, you have to have somebody who is CGC certified witness the book that you have as it's getting signed by the artist, by the creator, the writer. Sometimes you might get a celebrity to sign the book, and if at CGC, if they are not there at the time of the book getting witnessed, then they will not certify that as signature series, which we'll see an example of in a little bit. The last entity that grades is PGX. They're typically not used very often. They're just a different option. Everybody, or between those three companies, they kind of have their own rules, regulations, but they're all on a 10-point grading scale. So comic books are graded from on a 10-point grading scale, 10 being the best. And when you start looking at a graded book, you'll see a few different things. So in the top left corner, that's where you're going to see the grade. In the case of this Incredible Hulk issue number 271, this one was graded at a 9.4. So basically, it got about 6 points knocked off of it because of different imperfections that are coming that were done to the book. And those imperfections could be creases, they can be spine ticks, they can be the coloring of the paper. And basically, what they'll do is they'll evaluate the book and look for all these imperfections, and they'll assign it a grade. All three of these companies use the Blue Label as a universal grading tool for books that have not been altered. And we'll go into that more in a little bit. But if you just have a typical book, it's not getting signed, and it has a blue tag, you're in a good spot, because that means your book had no alterations done to it, maybe besides a few damages that the book gained along the way. And in the case of this Incredible Hulk book, being as old as it is, it can get a lot of damage done to it over time. So if you look over into the bottom right corner of the top of the CGC slab, you're going to see a description of what's important about the book. So in the case of this Incredible Hulk book, it's the first comic book appearance of Rocket Raccoon. And we talked about Rocket Raccoon a little bit in a previous episode when we went through my collection, but this is where they're going to say death of this character, or the first appearance of Rocket Raccoon, the second appearance, the first full appearance, and it's going to give a description to the significance of the book. The other cool thing that they do is they date it. So they take the date of the book and they apply it to the description here. Another thing they do is they put the barcode, and that's for the CGC census. So you could take the barcode and you could go to CGC's website, and if it pulls up, it means that it is a true CGC certified book, that it got graded at the points that it's at. And if you find a book maybe like on eBay that you're wanting to purchase, this would be a great way for you to authenticate the book yourself and make sure that it is a true CGC book. Next to the grade itself, you'll see a description of who the artist was, who the author was, and anybody else that had maybe penciled or sketched something to the book. And that's where they give the credit to those people. We don't have a picture of it right here, but if you turn it around, sometimes depending on when you got the book graded, it'll give a better description as to the imperfections. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. I don't really know under what conditions they decide to put that on. But what you will see on the back is in one of the corners, it'll say white pages, off-white pages, yellowed pages, cream-colored pages. And that just kind of gives a better description as to the integrity of the book and how it was taken care of throughout the years. So another example of a CGC book is the CGC Signature Series. And we were talking about getting books signed a minute ago, and that's where this comes in. So in the example of this Alias #1, which is the first appearance of Jessica Jones, it is actually signed by the writer and the artist, Brian Michael Bendis being the writer and David Mack being the artist. And the reason why this qualifies as Signature Series is because a certified witnesser of CGC was present when this book got signed. And that is how it's able to qualify for its yellow tag that you see. Everything else is the same. You still get the grade on the corner where it says 9.2. So there's enough imperfections to knock it off about 8 points. You still get the description where it would say the first appearance of Jessica Jones and who the artists, who the writers were, the pencilers, the sketchers, whoever was part of this book. The cool thing that they do, though, is on the tag itself, on the label itself, they put when the book got signed. So it actually it helps you out as a collector, and it also helps out someone who is maybe trying to purchase this book as well, that it gives the date of when it got signed. There are some instances where you can take these books to like a comic book dealer and they'll crack the slab for you, pull the book out, and maybe you want to get somebody else to sign it, and then you have to keep the slab so that CGC knows that you did it, and it will give them an opportunity to also add that extra signature to the label. In this case, I only got this. I got this signed at one event where both the artist and Brian Michael Bendis, the writer, were at, and so you'll see on here that they both got signed at the same time. And if you take that barcode and you type it into the census, you would be able to see the same information. So it'll tell you when it's dated, when it got signed, and how many of these books are out there that are similar to this one and at that grade. So that's kind of a cool thing about the census. Now, we talked about the CGC witnesser having to be present at the time of the signature. The cool thing about another company, CBCS, is that they will take your book, and for a small fee, they will look at the signature, evaluate it, and be able to authenticate it. Typically, this takes a little bit longer for them to do, depending on the age of the book, depending on the condition of the book. It might get sent out sooner than later. Typically for CGC, you got wait times from anywhere between 3 to 6 months. And when we're in the busy time of the year, like the convention times of the year, that timeline could be even longer for a book to come back out and be returned to you. So another example of a CGC book is this green labeled CGC qualified grade. A qualified grade means that there's something missing to the book. In the example of Incredible Hulk, the first appearance of Wolverine, there are stamps in there where authenticity stamps, where people would cut those out and collect them. So if this was that book, it would state missing the Marvel stamp does not hinder the book, or does not hinder the storyline, I should say. And that's really important, because in the case of that first appearance of Wolverine, with how important Wolverine is to Marvel, it could really drive down the price if something like that was taken from the book. Also, you could still send a non-witnessed signatured signed book to CGC, but it will also come back with this green label. And instead of saying signed by Stan Lee, for example, it will say has the markings of the name Stan Lee written in marker across it. And that doesn't make it any less real. But what CGC is stating is that they have no way of truly knowing if Stan Lee signed that book. And unfortunately, in the case of Stan Lee, there's been many fakes throughout the years, but it's just one more level of their process to guarantee that you're going to get the best product back after the grading process. And again, this could be this label could be given to a book that has multiple damages to it. It just really depends. It takes that qualified CGC witnesser to or evaluator, I should say, to really scrutinize the book and make sure that no other things have happened to it over time. Another example of a CGC book is this restored purple label. The restored label gives evidence of repairs. So sometimes people will try to brighten the colors of the book to make it look newer and fresher, and hoping that they would get a better product. Well, even if you take it to someone to get fixed, you're still going to get this purple label. And basically, the things that they do to it is there's a different grading scale that they use. They still use a 10-point scale, but they give an abbreviated grade to it too, as to what repairs were made. So there's an aesthetic scale that's done through an ABC grading scale, and it determines the materials used and visual quality of the work. So they look at the extent of the repairs or restoration that was done to the book and see how well that was done. And if it was done pretty well, then you would get an A rating on this. The other scale that they use is a quality scale. I'm sorry, a quantity scale, and that goes from a 1 to 5 rating system, and that determines the extent of the piece filled and color touches. So, going through the book, looking how many times they had to add color, add ink, or add whatever materials that they needed to fix this book, and then you would get a grade on that as well. And when you're looking for a comic book to maybe purchase that's already graded, these purple and green labels are less sought after, and they also drive the value of these books down. That doesn't make the book any less important, but most collectors want that blue or yellow label. And that brings up a conversation of, should a book be graded? If the imperfections are too crazy, it may not be worth your time and money that you're going to spend to get this graded. If the book is completely torn up and it's missing pieces and it's missing pages, it's probably not a good idea to get that particular book graded. So it might just be better just to keep it raw and kind of keep it as a keepsake if it was an important book to you. But if you're looking to sell it, a lot of times the purple and green labels do not pull the same as a book that gets the blue label or the yellow label. An example, though, of a book, even if it was severely damaged, whether it was restored or if it goes under the qualified green label, is an example would be like the first appearance of Wolverine. Because that book is so important, you might still want to get it graded, even if you're missing that Marvel authenticity stamp that's inside of it, because of the importance of the book. But if it's any back issue book and it was severely damaged and it's a small appearance of somebody, it may not be worth your money, because you'll be spending anywhere from $60 and up to get books graded. And even if you got it signed, there's still a small fee to get it witnessed and get the signature authenticated. So those are a couple things that you need to think about. If it were up to me, focus on your blue and yellow labels. Those are the ones that are going to bring you the bang for your buck, but they're also going to be the more expensive of the graded books. If it's a super old book with a really important appearance, such as the first appearance of Wolverine, it might be worth your money if you're willing to uh, take the grade that it's at and the label, but at least you have that first appearance. Um, in the case of a lot of other books out there, maybe like the first appearance of Iron Man, it's important. It's an important book, and it's really hard to find. So if it's a decent price, at least you have the book. Um, and that's a good way to kind of go about uh, deciding if you should go to those green or purple labels when purchasing a book, is if it's an important character, important event that happened, and that would be a good way for you to decide if you want to get that book. So another label that we can talk about is this gold prestige label. And basically, what this is if a book has the if it qualifies as prestige, what that means is it had to be a part of an original collection, and that book had to be bought off the newsstand when the book released. A lot of these books are super old, and they have to be made of a vintage material. They also must be consist of a considerable number of comics. So what that means is, in the case of this Planet's comic number 7, you would have to have the entire run of this series, and you would take that important book, and if you were the only owner and you bought it off of the newsstand and it qualifies that it has vintage materials, and it qualifies at a high grade, you may be able to get this prestige label. But again, um, you have to have it bought off the newsstand. It has to be a vintage material. You have to have a considerable amount of comics that this book was a part of. So not only just the series that it was released with, but thousands of other books that might qualify as prestige as well. And then again, it has to have a high grade, and that's one of the important things. If you have a book that's severely damaged and it comes back as a lower grade, chances are you probably will not get this prestige label. Another label we're going to look at is a no grade. So it's still a blue label, but this is for books that are maybe missing covers, or they're missing a part of the interior pages, and it's verified as authentic. So if a considerable amount of a book is missing, instead of maybe getting the qualified label, the green label, you would get a no grade. Um, an example of this would be maybe if you had the first appearance of Batman, and uh, you don't have the entire book, but you don't have the cover page, the rest of the book, then this grade would be given a no grade. But again, in the case of the first appearance of Batman, it might be worth getting that non-covered book graded because of the importance of that character. Another example would be the first appearance of Spider-Man. Maybe you are missing um, portions of the book, but because the significance of Spider-Man in Marvel Comics, it's still worth possibly getting it graded. Of course, you're not going to pull that 15 to 20,000 price tag that it goes for sometimes. But it might be $100 book or a $200 book, which still might be worth your while to still have a first appearance of Spider-Man. And CGC offers a bunch of different types of labels besides the ones we just discussed. There is a label that you can get just the cover graded, and it'll come back with its own set of criteria of of the condition of that book. So what I would suggest is, if you are wanting to get a book graded, then really think about your investment. Again, you're going to be spending $60 and up, and then you're going to be waiting months depending on how old your book is and how severely damaged it is. And then, of course, waiting in the line of the books that came before you. And sometimes it could be a very long process, and it's a risk. Sometimes it might be worth keeping a book raw instead of getting it graded, because if the difference of a really expensive book is a tenth of a point, then that could be the difference of hundreds of dollars and $100. And I've seen that before. Back before Carnage was as popular as he is now, sometimes it was just better to sell the book at a $50 to $70, $80 range instead of getting it graded, it coming back as a lower grade, and then not even be able to get that $50 to $70 price tag on it. If it's a first appearance, I would definitely consider getting it graded depending on the first appearance. If it was the first appearance of a character like Echo from Daredevil, I probably wouldn't get that one graded, even if she appeared in MCU, just because the significance of her and the significance of how many people know about her is not that good. But in the case of certain breakout characters like the Winter Soldier at the time, that would be an interesting book maybe to look at getting graded. And again, think about those two reasons. Is the book important to you? Does it have some kind of sentimental value to you that where you just want to get it graded to preserve? Then maybe it's worth your time. Maybe you'll get the investment back of the money that you put into it. Or are you trying to flip it? And in that case, you need to look at prices and really think about the condition of your book and see if it's worthy of being graded. And at this time, we want to thank our friends over at Watto's Scrapyard for sponsoring this episode of Collecting Comics. You could find them on Instagram at Watto's Scrapyard and on Facebook and eBay. They make 3D printed parts for hard to come by Kenner and Hasbro vehicles, as well as resin painted head sculpts of dozens of different characters in the Star Wars universe. If you don't see a character you like on their Instagram, send them a message and they can get it designed and printed for a reasonable fee. So these are two examples of resources that you could use to help decide if you should get a book graded. The first resource is a book called The Overstreet Guide to Grading Comics. And basically what this book does is it goes over the criteria for a book that qualifies for the grade it gets. So if you had a book that was graded at maybe a 5.0, then you would look at that criteria, and it actually shows you pictures of why that book will get a 5.0. So does it have a crease that measures at a certain length? Does it have a rip? Are the pages foxed? And foxing is more of a redding or oranging of the paper with little dots around it. And that happens mainly because of the paper that was used back in the day, this really acidic style paper And over time, when it's exposed to different types of heat or different types of weather, you might see some foxing. But if you're interested in learning how to grade a book yourself, this is a great start. This Overstreet guide to grading comics. And again, it shows different examples of what a 9.8 would look like, or what a 1.0 would look like, and it would give you the criterias, the measurements of why it would grade at that grading point. Another resource you could use is this Overstreet comic book price guide. And basically what this does is it's a huge encyclopedia of books that were created from any genre or publication, and it assigns them a price tag uh, at the point of what it would be graded at raw. So if you had a regular comic book and you were thinking about getting it graded, and you were wanting to see the value of it, basically you would look up that book alphabetically, um, like you would in a dictionary or an encyclopedia. And when you find that book, you would scroll over to the right a little bit, and you'll start seeing point values or dollar values. And you would basically kind of find the grade that you thought it was at, using the using the guidebook of grading comics that explains what each book would be graded at due to the imperfections, and that would be the value. The downside a lot of times to using this comic book price guide is it's not always accurate. By the time the book released, which at the time of the viewing or recording of this this particular episode, the book came out about 2 weeks ago, and it was a review of the books from that point and before that. And a lot of times books will fluctuate, but by the time this this price guide is released, but it's for older books, it's still a really good resource to kind of give a range of what that book would go for, because a lot of times you don't see some of these older books on eBay. You don't see them out in the market, and this would be a really good option for you if you're into those gold silver age books to pick up, to kind of understand the value of the books. When I purchased this book, I mainly use it for the description that it gives of the book. So in the case of our Incredible Hulk book, the first comic book appearance of Rocket Raccoon, I would use it as a resource to learn more about the book, as opposed to taking the number that it says in the book for a price tag. And that's a great thing about the Overstreet price guide, is that you're not sure of the history of a book. Well, look it up alphabetically, and it'll give you a short description. First appearance of this, appearance of the Avengers, appearance of Batman, or appearance of the Joker. And then it would also give the year. A lot of times books are so overly printed and they go back to issue number ones, and it's hard to figure out where it might fall in continuity. Well, this is what that will do, because it will go by series, by volume, and you would be able to find that book in your price guide. And again, they're just resources. If you don't want to pick these up, you don't have to, but it would be good to keep in a collection, especially if you're going to start looking at how to grade a comic. And the good thing about the guide for grading comics is when you go to a shop, you can now have some knowledge of, well, I think it's this grade. And sometimes it might work in your favor, where you would get a lower price on a book, because you're able to be like, well, there's a crease here and the crease here and this and that, and it might drive the price down a little bit for you in your favor. And then again, with the Overstreet price guide book, just using it as a reference, not necessarily a solid number for a price, because again, these books do fluctuate. And if it's a first appearance of an important character, or maybe someone who's coming out in a movie, then those prices are going to fluctuate daily at sometimes, and it's not going to be as accurate as you would want it. So now we're going to look at some more books. So we always want to talk about books where you could start jumping into comics with, and maybe starting your own collection, finding some heroes that you like. I'm a huge fan of Thanos, and when it comes to Thanos books, I always pick them up. He's always a fan favorite. He makes for a really good story, and this particular Thanos book came out in 2018, and I argued at the time that it was the best book out in the market in that year. This Thanos book was really good, and the first 12 issues, they were pretty decent. It was a really great story, but it didn't start picking up until the next issue, the Thanos 13, which is the first appearance of the Cosmic Ghost Rider. And basically, starting with issue number 1, Thanos is really sick. Something has happened to his powers, and he's looking at a way to get them back. And over time, he starts looking for different celestial entities that will help him get his powers back, and so on. But again, the book really doesn't pick up until issue 13. And this story arc was called Thanos Wins. And basically, the storyline was Thanos got his powers back. He was ready to get back to the fighting and taking over worlds and things like that. And then he finds himself wanting to be the champion and wanting to be the best, like he always did. But he's fighting these creatures and people in this huge arena, and then out of nowhere, the Cosmic Ghost Rider comes swooping in, and he's still a very popular character right now, and basically takes him back. He takes him into the future where he meets his older self. And I don't want to give too much of this book away, but it's really, really, really good. If you have the chance to pick up at least issues 13 to, I think it goes to 17 or 18, you need to at least get that story arc of the Thanos Wins. It leads us into the Infinity Wars storyline, and it's kind of funny because Thanos is bragging at the beginning of that book about I'm going to be the best, and it's inevitable that in the future I win everything. And if you've read Infinity Wars after that, you kind of know what happens to Thanos from there. But this is a really good example of a storyline to jump into if you're just getting started. If you're a fan of Thanos, if you liked him in the movies, this is a really good representation of some of the craziness that he did in more recent years. Another story that I really appreciated was Jonathan Hickman's Infinity storyline. And I talked about it a little bit in the previous episode, but this book is part of what the MCU pulled from for the Infinity War movie. So this is in this storyline, this 6-issue storyline, this is where you get the Black Order, the first appearance of. And actually, if you want the true first appearance of Corvus Glaive, you need to look for the Free Comic Book Day version of this Infinity storyline, because that actually came out before the actual story did. And it basically kind of goes into the Thanos, he's what he calls raising everybody. And basically that just means everybody, or what in this case he was killing the children so that no one could ever rise up and try to take him on and it was only certain civilizations. And if the civilization wanted to survive, he would ask for all the firstborns, and he would basically take care of them. And all the while this is going on, there's another group called the Beyonders who are destroying planets, and they're going from planet to planet, and they have their sights set on Earth. And basically what happens is the Avengers go to help some of these planets, and they find themselves out in these space battles, and they're fighting and fighting and fighting. Well, Thanos finds this as his opportunity to go and conquer Earth. And basically what he'll do is he'll send his Black Order to do his bidding in these different cultures, like with the Inhumans in Wakanda and in other places. And the Avengers eventually find out about this, and they're having to rush back from space and to help go fight the Black Order and fight Thanos. And it ends up being a really good book. And then Jonathan Hickman continues to write his New Avengers and Avengers book, which eventually leads us into Secret Wars, and kind of the collapse of Marvel Comics at the time, where they basically started everything fresh again, and brought out their new Avengers that they had with like Hercules and Kamala Khan and all these other characters that might have been in the Ultimate Universe, like Miles Morales Spider-Man, and brought them into the current universe. But it's a really good book. It's a really good way to start out if you like the cosmic stuff. And I would highly suggest either of these two books. When I was working at the comic book store, I would always recommend that Thanos wins storyline to start off with, if you're just starting out with your collection. Another book. Oh, I'm sorry. This book right here, The Black Vortex, was actually our name that comic book from our last episode. And Danny Lee got it right again. The Black Vortex was a book that was mainly about you look into through this mirror, and when you do, it presents you as your best self. And characters kind of had a moral choice to make if they wanted to see their best self and be changed, or if they want to stay the way they were. And sometimes it could be for the best, and sometimes it could be for the worst. But this was our comic, our name this comic from last week. And for this week, this is our name that comic. This is actually a first appearance of a certain character. And I want to see if you guys can figure out whose first appearance is in this book and what book is it. So you have Captain America on the cover, and it looks as if he's throwing a shield and fighting a huge robot. I want you in the comments to tell me what book it is, what number the book is, and who is the first appearance in this book. And as always, we'd like to thank our Patreons for supporting our channel and supporting all of the shows that are in the Collecting Weekly network. So we would like to thank Ben Porter, Griffin Campbell, Sean Fear, Ian Seeby, Renee Mendez, Eric Marisol, Quinn Aguirre, Dan Lee, Deanie Martin, Stephen Krent, Jason Nelson, Big Fern, King Zachary V, Caesar Mariquin, Eric Ruiz, Mario Cortez, Stephen Percha, Sean Yotzi, Scott Bradley, and Jesse Contreras. Again, Thank all of you for supporting us and this channel, for collecting weekly, and for collecting comics and all the other shows that are in our network. And if you want to be considered certified crispy, this is our August giveaway sticker, our certified crispy bacon sticker. It's a really fun sticker to add to your collection. And if you would like to become one of our Patreons, we have two options. The Sweet Angel, it's $5 a month, and our certified or our crispy, which is $15 a month. And then we would like to shout out the rest of our shows on Collecting Weekly. Collecting Weekly and After Dark are our weekly shows. Small Talk, Only Fools in Collecting, Collecting Comics are our bi-weekly shows. Live and Let Dice, Collecting Rarities, and Creeps Are Us are our monthly shows. And again, I'd like to thank you for tuning in to this episode of Collecting Comics. If you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out through the comments or through the Facebook page, and I'd be more than happy to talk comic books with you guys. Once again, guys, my name's Sean, and this is Collecting Comics.